Welcome into episode number 24 of The Right Stuff, a Blood Bowl podcast brought to you by Empire Games, coming out of sometimes lovely, always dangerous for lizard men, Anderson, South Carolina. I am Yannie here with Nathan, and we got more lizards in peril this week.
Yeah, we exist in an amorphous temporal zone where time has lost all meaning for the league, as far as the league is concerned. But the one constant is danger for the lizards.
Yes, yeah. This is we're in our Blood Bowl Rashomon era.
Yeah. So we do have some real sickos in this league. There were a lot of people who played some doubleheaders in the past week to try to help catch back up.
Yes. To varying levels of success.
Yeah. So we still got some more pending games to get all the way caught back up. In theory, there should be more progress on that this week. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah, if you are listening to this and you are currently looking at playing games beyond your week 6 game, please let us talk about them. We want to praise your games, okay?
Yeah.
Or roast you mercilessly.
Right.
One of the two, but whichever one it is, you can't leave it in limbo. It's going to happen eventually.
There's no such thing as bad publicity, right? So,
exactly. Yeah.
Our discussion topic this week is the art of blocking redux. We're just going to kind of talk about hidden things. I think that'll be fun.
Yeah. As someone who gets to hit a lot of people twice in one action, it seems like you would have some experience.
I have some opinions of that.
Yeah. But yeah, we're going to just jump right in. We've got games going all the way back to week 3 to cover, so let's jump on it. Our week 3 game was Swamp People and the Skaven Blight Skitter Stars. Both these were taking journeymen into this game, so there was a point where the lizardmen were able to get some damage in, but we know Skaven are resilient, can score with less players, so it was a 2-0 win for Coop.
My note for this game was this was a kind of classic I didn't hear no bell type of game where despite getting beaten black and blue up and down the field, you're still just taking the ball and dunking it in the end zone, right?
Yeah. For people hearing bells, possibly. So we have our week 4 catch-ups. This was the first one of our doubleheaders. So between Wayne and Warren, Arbor Vitae, and the Wolfpack. In the first half, it was 1-0. Ended up in a rout.
It was like a kind of classic last word situation. Warren stopped by. Was like, hey, I held Wayne to 1 touchdown in the first half while they were taking a break at halftime, and I was like, oh, that's not bad, and then turns out spoke a little too soon there.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, if you don't put any damage on the elf team, eventually they're going to do elf things and come and harass you and steal the ball. Right.
I think this is actually, in this version of the game, I think dwarves are, like, the conventional wisdom would be like, hey, this team has a whole bunch of block and tackle. I should be really good into elves. That is not necessarily true, right? And you don't have the stuff that actually puts damage on elf teams starting on your roster. And I think like Warren, even like his Mighty Blow characters didn't even have tackle, and so that's kind of like a problem. And a lot of times I think people will target like the War Dancer, and it's a blodger, and so if you go to like knock over your opponent's like toughest model to hurt on the team, and you just low roll the whole game, you're not going to get any damage in. So
yeah, I was like, we can flash back to like previous seasons when we had the Mike playing Wood Elves. Like that was a point where you saw what can happen if you're able to get that damage in and like put damage on people.
Well, no, a lot of that also is if you get the Wood Elf player behind the 8 ball the whole season, and they're not getting to develop really their players because there's just a constant churn of linemen on the team. Mm-hmm. Like the Wood Elf lineman is a pretty good stat line. you add one skill to a Wood Elf lineman, and they're already like an incredible player, and then every skill that you add after that just makes them more and more insane. But if you are just killing the Wood Elf lineman before they get a chance to develop, then the team is just kind of behind. Once the team starts getting developed, that's where it can kind of snowball through a season, and things get really disgusting if left unchecked. So,
yeah. Hopefully, there are some people left that can check going through. Next game.
There's definitely one team that's in that division that's been a check on every team that's played against so far. So
that is true. Only mild spoilers. But,
yeah.
Right. Next up, we had the Soul Peak Dooms and the Necromantic State Hellhounds. It was a 1-1 tie.
Yeah, and Jennings had a write-up in the Discord that I will just go over real fast, since this kind of tells the story of the game. In Jennings' own words, first half was a fairly standard, trading hits while Jack drove down the field. Standout play was Jennings' tackle Mighty Blow Wraith blitzing his ball carrier. He rolled push skull. He decided to re-roll it because maybe it was going to be the only hit he could get on the ball carrier, and then he re-rolled into double skulls, and his Wraith went down and got stunned. And so Jack scores. Jennings had a chance for a 2-turn score, but naturally the werewolf failed to receive a handoff. During the second half, Jennings' first block was a double skull, and so he already ate a re-roll right there, and then his ghoul failed to pick up the ball. On the second turn, his first block was double skull, so he just decided to eat that and let his ghouls and whites, like Jack's ghouls and whites, run into his backfield. Jennings was eventually able to pick up the ball, retreat to a corner near his end zone, and then use his wolves and ghoul to set up kind of a screen to get away from the Jack's team. Unfortunately, this left the rest of his team based, and on turn 6, Jack KO'd 3 of Jennings' players, and on turn 7, he got 2 more. Luckily, the ghouls and the remaining werewolf were able to knock away his white and score on turn 8 to tie the game, which I had quite a few experiences with Necro like this, where you are fighting your team to move the ball anywhere. Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to play defense with Necro than it is to play offense. I'll say that for sure. That's sounds like a heck of a game.
For a game that was probably not quite as heckin' of a game. Oops, mostly nerdlings. Skipping like Skitter Stars. 2-0 win for the Snotlings.
Yeah. My note for this game said, well, this looks to be a Snotling game by all accounts.
Yeah, my first note was yawn. Like, I don't know. I can only see Morg so many times in tour play updates. Yeah. Before it's just kind of.
I wonder how many casualties Morg has actually accounted for in the season. It might be double-digit percentages of the total casualties in all the games. So
would not be surprised. Yeah, this is just a bloodbath. Snotlings tallied up 5 casualties. There were a total of 8 Skaven players got injured.
Yeah.
And
that's how many of my Khorne players got injured in that game. I think I had 8 injuries as well. So
yeah. Well, I think he has less players remaining than your team did at the end. He's got 5 active players on his roster currently for his next game.
Yeah, so. That's about how many I had because I had to go to the next game with 6 journeymen. So
yeah, so that is
that was my
experience. Doing Snotling things.
That was my experience with the team.
Yeah, we got the killer Snotlings in the total buy division.
Yeah, they're extremely lethal.
Yeah. All right, on to week 5 games. Finally, kind of catching up. We had Realmgate Marauders and Rag and Bone. It was a 2-3 loss for humans. Look at the line for this game. It seemed like Sean was able to score early, and Fred had a 1-turn in response, which I think normally you like having the 1-turn, but I think looking at the way the rest of that half played out, it left Sean time to score, to go up and going into the half.
Yeah, I'm happy that Fred got a 1-turn for sure. I think that's a great example of like knowing when you need to 1-turn versus when you need to grind it out, right? Mm-hmm. Now, I'm sure Fred's still working on his hold the ball, keep it secure, beat on people plan. And in Fred's shoes, I would probably take touchdowns where I could get them also, just to say that I'm on the board, right? I think Fred's general demeanor in games is kind of momentum based. I think if Fred gets like an early touchdown, then he feels like he's in the game. Whereas, if his opponent scores and then gets the ball taken from him, that could kind of kill your momentum, right? And Blood Bowl is a game that you do have to keep up like your mental fortitude through it, because if you get tilted, and take it from me, you get tilted in the middle of a game, you'll start making bad decisions. So,
yeah. On to the other half, the leg day snotling. I've dubbed them the pacifist snotlings. Not nearly as injurious as the chases. We had Little Titans of Mayhem and the Barbarians with a 0-0 draw.
All right, so this was my note for this game. Anthony Fantano reviewed the Nationals album, the first 2 pages of Frankenstein, where he pretended to sleep for 9 minutes. And that was the entirety of his YouTube video. That was my note for this game.
Yeah. that's a solid note, I would say. Yeah, it's like this is very different than the Snotling games you've seen more recently. I was able to do more casualties than Juan did, so that's huge. Like, I think if you're coming out of that game with only taking a couple injuries, like 2 injuries to your team, none of them like super debilitating, you got to be happy with that.
Yeah, Black Orcs actually have some skills that are good against Snotlings, and like Brawler lets you fish. If you don't have block, Brawler lets you fish for a pal. Grab negates their sidestep. The fact that the Black Orcs are 4 strength and 10 armor means Morg isn't as good as pulping them as other people. Morg needs, like against a 3 strength person, Morg needs 1 assist to get 3 dice. And 10 armor usually means Morg has to use his Mighty Blow against the armor to break through. Mm-hmm. And that means it's not left over for the injury, so you're more likely to stay stunned. So I do think Black Orcs have an advantage in this matchup, and if Ide's team were slightly more developed, then maybe he wins that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Up next, we got Those Who Wander versus the Low-Key Rat Bastards. I had a note I found on this from Will. This is after the game. I wore a shirt depicting Fenrir eating the moon for the game, for the record. Theme for the Loki matchup. I forgot to banter about it during the game because of how one-sided it was. So, and it was very one-sided. 3-0.
Yeah.
9 casualties.
Austin, I want you to pay very close attention to the art of blocking section that we talk about later on. It's not me to try to. I'm not trying to be mean. Before anybody says I'm accusing, the only thing I'm going to use this podcast. The only people I'm going to bully with the podcast are stunty players. Those sick freaks. Austin, on the other hand, is somebody who I think doesn't understand how fragile some of the teams that he played are. Right, like he kind of had this experience with Norse too. Norse have block, so they only have 8 armor, but they also have thick skull, so they actually have some survivability taped onto them. Whereas like goblins and Skaven linemen are more fragile than that. Snotlings the exact same way. I think what Austin is doing generally is he's trying to like hit back, and that's not where Underworld strength is. Underworld is a scalpel. You want to pick one model on the opponent's team to just laser focus down each turn if you can. Smash it with the Rat Ogre. Foul it if it doesn't leave the pitch. And then you need to circle the wagons around the Rat Ogre. You don't want to give your opponent a blitz on the Rat Ogre. You need to use your Snotlings to screen it off. You need to use your Goblins. Like you have a whole lot of dodge on this team, and you need to use that to reposition. You need to keep your Blitzer, your Thrower, and your Gutter Runner all safe. Everybody else on the team is disposable, right? But that doesn't mean give your opponent hits on them, right? And I think this is a really good example of that type of thing in action. Will's team was not 9 casualties deadly, right? Mm-hmm. That is a product of Will getting a whole lot of extra hits. And I'm willing to bet that Austin probably gave those hits. Austin's playing this team kind of like a tournament team. In tournaments, you can kind of play Underworld a little more loosey-goosey, where if your players are getting killed, that's fine. They'll be back for the next game. But in a league, you're going to run out of treasury. You're going to run out of, like, good players, right? You're going to get people, particularly positionals on this team. You're going to get positionals on this team killed, and it's going to be really expensive to replace them.
Yeah.
So.
For sure. Yeah. 9 casualties, tough to come back from, but
yeah.
Praying for a speedy recovery of all those Lokis. Up next, we had another game, part of a doubleheader. The Gondolin Gloryhounds and the Tidal Terrors. And this one was like an entire game of Blood Bowl in the first 2 turns.
Yeah. Did Jim get a 1-turn touchdown?
It was a blitz.
Okay. Yeah.
So the way the game started off, Jim was kicking to Clay, rolled a blitz, was able to get the ball, Jim scored on his turn 1.
God.
Kicked off again on turn 2, and Clay lost the vicious ref and got a player sent off.
No. God.
Yeah.
So for those keeping track at home, I'm not trying to blab Jim's business all over the podcast, but with Frenzy on his blitzer and Sidestep on that 1 agility catcher, you can actually do some 1-turn scores with this. It's not necessarily easy. It'll take like a little bit of positioning, but you can basically get a chain push twice with the Frenzy guy and then set up another block. And just keep blocking the sidestep catcher up. And since the sidestep catcher has got 1 agility, that means he can catch in 1 tackle zone on a 2. And that means he dodges into a tackle zone on a 2. So that player is really terrifying. And if you're not like prepared for that, then you're gonna have some troubles. So
yeah, the 1 agility you were talking about it yesterday is like, it's basically a amalgamation of a whole bunch of other skills that you would normally not be able to get on and off.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. You can kind of simulate this with a gutter runner plus some mutations. Right. You can use 2 heads as a very common gutter runner mutation, because that means you can dodge into 1 tackle zone on a 2. But the 1 plus agility is extra arms plus 2 heads. It's actually a crazy leap piece now, I believe, because if you're leaping into 1 tackle zone, you leap on a 2 plus. You could leap into 2 tackle zones on a 3. I don't know if leap is the next call. It's probably sprint. That way it becomes like a very reliable 1-turn score. But I don't know. The sky's the limit at 1 plus agility.
I think in another week or 2 we should do a deep dive on the scariest players in the league.
Yeah, I could see that.
That catcher will be up there.
That catcher's up there, yeah, for sure. It's up there with other strength and stat up characters currently. So.
Yes. Yeah, so ended up being a 3-1 win. It was 2-1 in the first half, and then the second half was not as eventful.
Right.
But, a Jim-ish game. All right. Up next,
it's a game where Jim got lucky, right? Like it's like Jim's already good, and like when you play against Jim and the dice are in his favor, it just doesn't feel fair sometimes.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Up next, we had Taisho Caron and Renegades of Funk. It was a 2-0 win for Taisho Caron. I caught a little bit of this game, and there was just a massive scrum happening in the middle. And what I saw was a frog leaping in on a 5 successfully and then picking out the ball on a 5. And then, like, making his way out.
Yeah.
So, it seemed to just be like a game where it's like, if you have those skills that the Slan just randomly get, like, that's the situation where they turned out to be pretty strong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think Slan are a bit of an enigma as a team. There is like a break point with the team where once you have like a certain number of skills, the team gets wild because it can attack on vectors other people just can't. Up until that point, I mean, it's funny because I think both of these teams that's true, right? I think Chaos Renegades is another one of those teams where the team barely functions. You hit 150 SPP, your team is scary. So I think Sean is a long way from there. I think Chris carrying stuff over is a little bit closer. And so if you're not scared to roll dice with Slan and you start hitting rolls, then silly stuff starts happening. So, and apparently Sean's dice were just awful in this game. He gave Chris 3 casualties during the game. So the casualties that Chris got weren't from blocks that Chris threw. It was from blocks that Sean threw, which is really funny.
That is.
So
that's like the worst possible thing happening to you 3 times in one game. It's like,
yeah. It's like a turnover plus you lost a piece, right? So you activated a model, removed that model from the pitch, and ended your turn, which is awful.
Yeah, because you're probably also just leaving something else in a position to also get removed.
Yeah.
Right. Next game up, we had Swamp People and Slaughterhouse 11, the capper of this doubleheader. That was your game, so go ahead and recap it.
Yeah, so Joe Skoda did not know how Dribble and Drool worked. He had never taken them before. And I, being a good Blood Bowl citizen, despite it not being in my best interest to play against Dribble and Drool, told him, you need to try out Dribble and Drool. You'll be surprised how good they are. And at one point, I think it was like after he threw his 5th or 6th foul, he said, you know what? I see the appeal to this. So, yeah. I think I was actually pretty lucky to win this game because Skoda's armor rolls and removal were they were lights out. Now, my 10 armor dudes, my Bloodseekers, despite the strength down that happened to one of them, my Bloodseekers were extremely resilient. They took a beating in that game. And it wasn't until there was like a foul on one of them that got the strength down. But that was bad. But my Corn Gores were just paper thin. He would just blitz one, no mighty blow or whatever, and would just KO it. My block dodge guy, I think on turn 2 got KO'd. It was like stuff like that where I wasn't giving him the blocks. He would just blitz one and peel it off. And so I wasn't even attempting to try to stop his first touchdown. Generally with Corn, I just want to force my opponent to score as fast as possible so I can get to the phase of the game where I get to hit them if I can. And I think he peeled 3 people on his opening drive over the course of 3 or 4 turns. And so I didn't activate 11 people all game because I was already down players before I even got to roll my first dice. And but I did use, I think, fairly solid positioning. This is a classic thing that happens with Lizardmen where if you can keep the Sauruses tied up away from the action, they can't ever get to any place relevant. I think a lot of times Lizard players will take whatever Saurus is free and then opt to blitz with that Saurus, when really they need to blitz with the Saurus who is currently tied up to get him into the action, right? Because they're 6 speed, you can usually just knock somebody away from you. And that's basically your Lizard dodge, right? It's blitzing on one, pushing somebody away from you, and then running the distance towards wherever is relevant, right? If you're just taking Sauruses and just throwing hits with them, you're kind of losing part of the character. You're not really using the 6 movement that's there, right? Anyway, he casualtied my block tackle Kormgor twice in that game. That was why I got the strength down on the Bloodseeker. It was like turn 2 or 3. I think he fouled it out of the game and rolled like a badly hurt. And I was like, I really need this block tackle if I'm going to try to get these stupid skinks off the pitch, right? I need this character to splatter skinks. So I brought it back in the game, and then like turn 7 is where he strengths down to the Bloodseeker, and I was like, because the guy had block, right? It was like, I've already invested in this character to get him useful. I rolled double skulls with the blood spawn on one turn. I got pro to get me out of that jam. I rolled triple skulls with a bloodseeker into a skink on a block. So that ate one of my rerolls in the second half. We were playing 7s at one point during the second half because like I actually got some removals leading into like the second half of the game, but he was like, every time I would take one of his pieces off the pitch, he would just take one of mine. He threw like a 1-die block into my blood spawn and KO'd it. It was the only time the blood spawn had hit the pitch during the whole game. I put him down one time, KO'd. I genuinely believe that anytime someone has touched my blood spawn, they have broken armor on it during the course of the season. So, but yeah, I think I scored my second touchdown. I had 5 players left on the pitch, like 3 of them were KO'd or something. I got them back, and so I managed to stop his touchdown with a deflection. He was out of rerolls, and he failed to pick up the ball. And he had 2 turns to score, and so he had a skink try to pull off some heroics. It picked up the ball in the backfield, ran up, went to throw a pass, and I had like snuck a Beastman behind his lines to base like a skink to try to cut off like the handoff route there. So he goes to throw the accurate pass, rolls the 6 for the pass. It's accurate. And I spike the 6 to deflect the ball down to ice the drive there. And I was like, I'm lucky to roll a 6 there because I got a feeling the way the rest of this plays out is that he like catches the ball on like a 4+ or a 5+, and then makes all his dodges and the go for it and score. So I'll take the 6 there to win the game. So
yeah, it feels like every season there's 1 or 2 good deflections.
And you don't get many chances.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was joking about how I could have taken very long legs on that guy because he's one who's had like a level. I just haven't had anything I felt like was worth taking at this point, and I feel like I'm just kind of gonna save for a stat because honestly, if he went to 7 speed, his job is to carry the ball, right? Going to 7 speed is better than sprint. It's better than sure feet. It's like both of those skills put together, except without even the 4% chance that fails, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I think I would take speed on him, and if I hit strength or agility or something like that, then he just becomes kind of crazy. So,
okay, well, finishing off another doubleheader. We got a whole bunch of doubleheader leftovers now. So it's like the second wave.
Yeah.
All right, we got the Wolfpack and Necromantic State Hellhounds. It's a 3-0 win for Jennings.
Necro's just good in the dwarves.
Yeah. The thing I saw was when I think I talked to Warren a little bit before the game, talking about different inducement plans he could take, and he decided to go with Grim Ironjaw.
Yeah, and he's just kind of like a slightly stronger dwarf. So I feel like Grim Ironjaw doesn't bring anything to the table that you don't already have, if that makes sense.
It seems like he is. I think his special rule only goes in for people with like strength 5 or higher, I believe.
I don't know.
It's like a mighty. I think it's
like a mighty blow.
Yeah, it's like mighty blow for things. It's called Slayer. That's all I know. So, but
yeah, I mean, he's Grim Ironjaw. I feel so like that first wave of star players. You had the really broken players, the Griffs, the Bombers, the Morgs, the Hackflims, and then you had everybody else. You had your Roxana Dark Nails and your Willows and your Grim Ironjaws and, like Zug is fine, but a lot of that first gen of star players they're just kind of dudes.
Yeah.
They're like a model that was on a team but slightly better. And so I'm not convinced of Grim Ironjaw's viability. I've played against him a couple of times. He's not particularly impressive. He's not like a board presence. He's not even like a Zug or a Grombrindel.
Yeah.
I really like Grombrindel. For 10k more, you get one less point of strength, but you get Stand Firm, you get Mighty Blow, you get Dauntless, and then you got Grombrindel's ability, which is wild. It's crazy. So
Yeah, someone who makes a lot of 3-up dodges, like even just like randomly giving like break tackle to a lineman to get him away from a flesh golem.
you can give break tackle to like your dwarf runner, and dwarf runner dodges out on a 2 into an open tackle zone, right? You can give Dauntless to like a dwarf lineman. You can give Mighty Blow to a dwarf lineman, right? Like if I'm sitting there and fighting flesh golems and zombies and stuff like that, like you want Mighty Blow will get some of them off the pitch. So I like Grombrindel quite a bit.
Yeah, it seemed like, but yeah, Grim got KO'd, and then I saw at least one drive where he did not come back.
Wow, yeah. And your inducement money's gone, so.
Yeah, which is rough. I know one of Jennings' wraiths got knocked out. It was the grandpa.
It was the bad wraith and not the good wraith.
Yeah, Jennings was like, the grandpa never comes back in the game. So, which makes sense.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, and it seems like it's just been a...
Grandpa gets his early bird special at 4:15 at the buffet, and then he's in bed by 5:45. So
yeah. It seems like the thing that's happening is people are able to. It seems like the last couple of games, it's like there's been someone got up a score on the dwarf team
and snowballed it.
Yeah, it's just like it's hard. I think if you don't have a movement 8 crazy runner,
strength
like
4
certain
runner,
people, it's definitely more difficult to try to like claw back into situations like that, and especially starting from scratch, like a new team, you're in a spot where like you don't have.
You make one square mistake.
Yeah,
you make one square mistake of movement with dwarves. That was my experience playing them back in the 2016 edition. It was one of those where I was like, I didn't plan 2 turns ahead, right? Like I was mapping out the next turn, but I didn't quite map out the following turn. I was a square off of positioning and stuff like that, right? Yeah. So.
All right. Next, doubleheader. Little Titans of Mayhem and the Gondolin Glory Hounds gyms. Second half of the doubleheader did not go quite as well for him.
No.
It looked like it was going to start off pretty strong. The pump wagon got sent off on a foul on turn 1. So
was Jim receiving or was Jim defending in that half? Looked like Jim was defending.
I believe.
I mean, keeping the Snotlings from scoring is pretty good. I don't know what kind of damage his team took. It looks like he didn't take like permanent damage.
Yeah. Yeah, he took 1 like debilitating injury.
Yeah.
So again, pacifist Snotlings.
Yeah. Yeah, and Jim like used the Snotlings like Mario uses a brick to punch coins out of, right? So, like, he had all kinds of SPP flying out of Snotlings in that game, right? 6 casualties is a pretty good, like I said, it's a good consolation prize type of thing for having to spend a bunch of time looking at Snotlings.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it seems like the one locked it up with a turn 16 Morg touchdown.
Yeah, Morg is really good against elves. If you don't have strip ball, your options of taking the ball from Morg are pretty limited. So.
All right, one last game, one last doubleheader to conclude. Renegades of Funk, Title Terror, and this game was. This is like route of the week.
Yeah,
we've already talked about a 4-0 game, and yet this one is.
We need a stamp that's like certified ass kicking, or something like that to just stamp on games. Because the funny thing about Sean is he's either winning by multiple touchdowns or he is losing by multiple touchdowns.
Yeah, my note for this game was there's a one-sided box score. Clay threw fouls, and Sean got touchdowns and casualties. He could not deal damage. He could not sustain anything, and Sean was just doing whatever he wanted. He got a certified big guy touchdown.
Yeah, a Red Ogre get a touchdown. I saw.
So yeah,
that's. I mean, the Rat Ogre, if he's got the ball, I think it's easy to score a touchdown with him, right? Because you can just declare blitz and he'll just punch the guy. He'll still activate, right? Like you don't have like the bonehead chance that like ogres do, where they'll just sit there without moving the ball for a couple of turns. I am going to give Clay props. He's got the highest Bucult score in the league right now. So Clay has had a crazy tough schedule so far. I wouldn't be shocked if Clay goes on a heater of a streak from here, because I don't know who he's got left to fight in this division.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like the thing. It's like you get all your rough games out of the way early.
And you're actually better off for the playoffs, right? Like if you're getting slapped around through your first handful of games, but you streak 6 wins into the playoffs, and your team looks great. There've been a lot of teams that have done this, right? Like there've been a lot of teams that have snuck into the playoffs, and then went on really deep runs because the team came together down the stretch.
Right.
Whereas some teams lose a key positional right before the playoffs, right? Like you don't want all those really tough games at the end of the schedule, because that's where you've got chances to lose pieces that you really want for the playoffs, right? Like if you're building your team around something like a one-turn gut runner or something like that, and it dies in like week 12, back to the drawing board.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the worst thing for Clay coming out of this game was his Crocs Gorga and agility down from a foul.
So it's from a 5+ to a 6+ now?
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like fine. Out of all the skills you could get, it's probably the least scary.
Crocs Gorga doesn't have passing, right?
I don't believe it does.
Yeah, I don't think so. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have passing, you can't get a passing down. So.
All right. So our in memoriam segment this week is fairly short and fairly forgetful. We had a journeyman for the Skaven Blight Skitter Stars get murdered
by Morg.
Yes.
No less.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
Yawn. And then a player that I'm sure everyone wishes would stay dead, Bomber Dribblestein, got killed while under contract by the Loki Rat Bastards.
Yeah. I'm just going to point out that Bomber's been taken in over 25% of the games that have been played in the league. He's been taken in 17 games, and there's been like 60-something games played.
Yeah.
So just putting that stat out there for anybody who's tired of looking at Bomber Dribblesnot in tour play. So.
Yep. Yeah. Permadeath star players coming soon.
Yeah, hopefully. That would be so nice.
Yeah. We have one honorary mention for an in memoriam, a player that was not killed but was forcibly retired. Ikit Claw Jr. Thrower for the Skaven Blight Skitter Stars.
May Ikit Claw the Third fare better than his predecessors.
Yeah, may he break the cycle of violence.
Generational trauma passed down from Skaven Thrower to Skaven Thrower.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, like on this, at least in that trend, it was trending towards it being healthy. This time it'll just pick up a couple, injuries along the way, but it'll be fine. That's going to do it for our recap. We're going to take a quick break here and then jump into the art of the block. Some people really need to listen to this, so make sure to stay tuned.
Yeah.
We got some art to talk about.
Yeah.
The art of the block, as you put it.
Yes. Well, that's a classic article written for Blood Bowl. I think it's like basically it's the I read theory, right, kind of post for Blood Bowl. I genuinely believe that some of the newer players to the league should probably read this if they haven't read it before. It's presented in like a nice visual format, and there's been other people who've taken stabs at it over the years, so there's like quite a good body of work that I would recommend reading, just so that you understand the math behind it. Now, I don't really want to go into all the math right here. I just kind of want to like talk about stuff in general, but and I do have to put the caveat here that if you do understand the math, Blood Bowl is designed to make you go insane when you were beating the odds, so to speak, the bad way, right? Like you're like, this is only a 2% chance of failure. Why does this keep happening to me? That's you won the lottery, but the wrong way, right? So yeah, I'm gonna put that caveat there. A lot of the stuff that we're gonna talk about numbers wise, you can roll really badly, right? You can triple skull. In theory, the average roll should never be a triple skull, but guess what? You can still do it. And you can still do it 2 dice rolls in a row, right? It's possible. But don't let that discourage you from making the plays you should make at a given time, right? So,
yeah. I think that is like, that honestly, before we even get into anything else,
that's
that
just
is like
game
the
theory.
key. That is a key thing.
That's game theory, right?
Right, yeah.
Like it's recognizing the plays you have to make to win a game, right? We've talked about knowing you're out before, right? And that's a very common card game player, because both of us have traditional card game Magic and other card games as well. That's a very common thing in those games, is playing to your outs, right? Blood Bowl is the exact same way.
Yeah, I think it does feel a little bit different. I don't know, just from like a tangible difference you feel, because like, you know, playing your outs in a card game, like you're just like drawing. It's like you don't know, but you are like putting that die in that cup and you got to roll it. So like it feels so much worse when it doesn't work.
Yeah, I think the dice cup is like, since I've been playing with one for the last like year or more or so, the dice cup is like a wonderful tension building device, right? I think honestly, if you just roll the dice in the cup, put it down, don't lift the cup up, and you just like make a quip between every roll, I wonder if you roll better or worse, right? Or at the very least, maybe you have emotionally prepared yourself for whatever lies underneath the dice cup, right? The Schrodinger's block that you've thrown. Yeah. It exists in a superpositional state of both failure and success at the same time. And you just make some sort of quote, 80s action movie style before you reveal it. You'll at least farm some clips for Twitch, at least. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. I like to say that, like when you buy a pack of cards, the cards are not set in stone until you actually open up the pack.
Yeah,
and that's the same way with dice.
Yeah, they're phasing through all the other. It's the Super Mario World 3, right, where the bonus is moving through the blocks, and you have to like jump and hit it with Mario. Yeah. I don't know why I keep making Mario references today.
I really feel like stomping on people.
Yeah.
Playing against Dribble and Drool will do that to you.
Yeah,
a very anti-reptile bias.
Yeah, you know how much I love getting stepped on.
So, in a world of tension, would you also say that dice cups are a good tension release against the wall?
Hey, part of my contract was we'd never talk about that in the podcast.
Well, good thing I never signed that. Yeah. So. With blocking, I guess you are a team that throws
a lot of blocks.
Yeah, twice as much blocks as everyone else per player, just about, conservatively. So I guess what would you say as a team that is like
looking to hit people?
You're always looking to block. Yeah. What are you? What's your mindset?
So a lot of it kind of comes down to a matrix, right? The skills you have versus the skills your opponents has, right? And this is the math that I said I wasn't going to talk about, but just visualize that grid in your head, right? I have block, you don't. You have block, I don't, right? There's like a whole list of things that can happen based off of like the skills you have versus the skills your opponent has, right? I think a lot of Blood Bowl is determining the dice you need to roll for a turn and working your way up the ladder of riskier and riskier plays, right? And you're kind of like pushing your luck the whole time. So, if you don't have block and you're throwing a 2-die hit, the odds are in your favor, but it's like a 11% chance that you knock yourself over and end your turn with a skull both down, or a skull or both down, right? So, the kind of figuring out those hits, the order you should take them in. Now, You mentioned Scrum earlier, like the Slan Chaos Renegade Scrum. That's one of those really interesting board positions because there's usually like a way out of a scrum for a given team, but it requires like very specific dice. And if you're like activating big guys, your rat ogres, your trolls, your ogres, there's a chance that something unpredictable happens and suddenly you're in like a worse position than before you started rolling dice, right? I think that's one of those things. Any given action in Blood Bowl actually has a ton of variance about how it plays out, and blocking is no exception. Blocking is probably the best example of how things can go crazy wrong during your turn, because you are taking something that's like in your favor, and then suddenly you've removed your own piece, right? That's really hard. That's a tough pill to swallow in the middle of a game of like, oh well, I was better off not taking that action. So when I'm throwing hits with corn, I'm usually trying to determine the future board state, right? Like I'm trying to. Corn isn't the best at protecting the ball. I generally protect the ball by keeping the opponent's team away from wherever my ball carrier is, just using frenzy to get extra movement and whatnot. And then using something like the blood spawn as like a massive deterrent to be anywhere near him. And there's something to be said for that, right? Like you have a piece that's really good at hitting, and your opponent it's not, the treemen are this way. It's not worth your time to throw hits into a treeman, generally speaking, right? You're way better off just outmaneuvering them wherever they might be on the pitch. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into throwing hits. I'm usually trying to like turn my hits into more hits if I can. Frenzy's good for that, right? Because you can oftentimes throw a hit, push somebody, throw a second hit. If you don't knock them down, this is pretty common against like blodgers. If you don't knock them down, you can chain push into another hit. And you know, Blood Bowl players' survivability is dependent on the skills they have, and that's like multiplied by the number of hits they've taken. And given enough time, eventually you hit 0, right? So the product of taking players out of the game is usually a volume of hits against a specific model. So,
yeah, I like the idea of like visualizing like where you end up at the end of the hits, because I think that is the thing where it's like it doesn't happen as often, like, you know, when you're getting kicked off to, like, you take your line hits, like you're gonna take those. And I feel like situation I found myself in the past has been like I throw like a line hit, then I throw another line hit, and then I'm like, okay, where do I want to put this person for the next one?
Yeah.
And like sequencing those, like even hits that are like not the most consequential, being able to figure out like where things, like always acting with intention is key. Especially in a game where it's like, even with the best intentions, sometimes your stuff fails.
Right.
Like if you don't have any, if you're just acting randomly and moving random pieces, taking random rolls you don't need to, you're just opening yourself up to something catastrophic happening.
Yeah, I've seen that quite a bit with some of the less experienced players. I've seen them like make go for it so they don't need to. I've seen them maybe make a suboptimal path for a blitz. I think the blitz on your turn, depending on your goal for the blitz, if your goal is to hurt players, using your blitz and angling it in such a way where the hit from the blitz pushes the person into a block is really important. If you're playing against these dodgy teams that don't want to sit there and fight you, like elves, you gotta like turn your line hits into more hits, right? If you go straight ahead, if you just line your models, if you got 4 strength models versus the elf 3 strength model, and you just put your 4 strength model on their 3 strength model and you throw your hits dead ahead, you're pushing them 3 squares away from the line. Whereas if you hit them at an angle, you can hit them down the line, and then you can keep hitting them, right? So that, I think, is like a huge thing players need to learn, is like where the model goes, right? Following up, also very important. I see lots of people not follow up when they should. I see some people follow up when they shouldn't. Like the trapping some of those agility players, trapping stunty players, forcing them to make lots of dodges to get free. Those are all really important skills, right? That you're trying to set up future blocks for yourself. Blood Bowl's a very interesting game in that regard, where to get blocks, you have to offer blocks to your opponent, right? I have to move a model into base with yours, and then it has to be there on my next turn when I want to throw a hit. Or, I have to give you something to hit, and I'm fine if I don't get the hit back. It's the zombie mentality, right? Like I'll throw a zombie at a big guy because I don't care what happens to the zombie. And I have no intention of actually ever throwing a hit with a zombie into a big guy, 2-die uphill. That doesn't make any sense, right? But keeping players tied up, positionally, you can gain stuff from it. You just got to know like what the odds of your opponent removing your guys are too, right? There's some degree of that. Something like a zombie is a pretty good candidate for that. Something like a retainer, also pretty good for that. Something like, say, a snotling can be, but you don't want to like mark stuff with block with a snotling. You don't want to mark stuff with like frenzy necessarily, though frenzy is kind of an interesting case because you can sidestep away sometimes. I do think the game has developed in an interesting way where they've added a bunch of like extra skills that don't make throwing a hit an automatic decision. Stand firm is one of those. Like the Imperial Bodyguard wrestle stand firm is a great model to ask yourself, do I actually want to hit this guy? Because if I roll like push both down, what does that do? Either he goes nowhere and he gets to hit me back, or I both down and he wrestles us. And now I don't have tackle zones in an important place for my turn. Being intentional is like a big thing about playing Blood Bowl, I think. Unless your whole thing is not being intentional. In which case I can't reason with you. So
right, yeah. Yes. So, talking about like making blocks favorable, I guess do you have a barometer for when you're taking the unfavorable? Like what's your stance on taking 1-dies or even like going uphill? Like what are your criteria for those?
Yeah, so criteria for going uphill is you have block, generally speaking. Block or wrestle. Wrestle is actually great for uphill blocks because if you choose the both down, you get to put their model on the ground and yours. I will go 2-die uphill into things that don't have stand firm. If I'm looking for a push or I've got wrestle, there's a couple of reasons why I would throw that. I almost never do just frivolously. There's always some sort of intentional thing for it. Another skill that's really good for 2-die uphill is actually Juggernaut. Because if you just need a push, I found myself in this position quite a few times with Corngores or with when I played Norse. I had Juggernaut on a Berserker. And if the 2-die uphill, you're like a 30% to roll a skull. But that means you're basically looking for a 3 or better to just push the model out of your way. And if you're trying to score, then that is like favorable odds. That's like a 3-up dodge. You get if you've got a reroll, same type of thing. With a reroll, I think you're down to like a 1 in 9 chance of hitting 1 skull on 2 dice uphill. And so I will use that for positional gains. If like a model is threatening to hit my model, 2 die uphill does have the upside of the chance that you can just remove their model. And I've played against lots of people who've thrown 2 die uphill into me and like resulted in casualties or KOs. Now, 1 die blocks, I'm in the camp where I will take those almost all the time. If you've got block, it's favorable, right? Now, I will ask myself, if I roll skull here, is that fine? And if the answer is yes, I will throw the block. If the answer is I need this dude standing, I won't throw the block, right? Because the 1 in 6 chance to fall over is too high for my risk tolerance. There are people who aren't that way. Now, I do find myself in what I call the honor duel, and that is like a lineman versus another lineman, where like neither player has skills. That's the board state that I call the honor duel, where they're just one dying each other back and forth. To me, that's just trial by combat. Like you're earning your place on the team by knifing their guy. So I will throw blocks like that in league play just because I've got the chance of hitting a casualty off of that type of thing. Now, granted, sometimes my guy gets casualtied, but that's the trade-off, right? If it doesn't affect the board state, I will throw those all day. I have been known that I will throw 1 die blocks if that's my best option. And when I played like nobility, that was quite often. Especially if you've got wrestle and whatnot, you've got like a nice chance to just take a model out of the way and then change the rest of the math in a scrum. So yeah, I mean that's a lot of the factors that go into it, is like how bad is failure here. And for leagues, I think the upside is usually worth throwing the hits, just so you've got more chances at SPP. So
awesome, yeah. Got a lot to think about going into future weeks. Any parting thoughts that don't involve throwing dice cups in the walls?
I will say that using blocks as dodges is a skill that some players can work on in the league, right? This is pretty common with elves because your whole team is strength 3. Your opponent goes to mark one of your dudes. The important thing is like if you're looking for a push, that will serve as a dodge, and you don't have to. The upside is you don't have to give up your positioning on the table. But the problem that I see a lot of times is that people will move, and I suspect this is what Austin is doing. Is you're playing a team that has a relatively low strength score, like Underworld. Somebody goes to mark your goblin. They want to bully your goblin, and you're like, well, I'm not going to stand for that. I'm going to bring some assist over, and the goblin's going to hit the guy. All right? But what they don't do is they don't think through where the assists need to be placed if they get a push. All right? So if I bring an assist around to the opposite side of the model and I push you, then the model that's been pushed is now standing next to the model that was giving the assist and can then throw a hit. Right? And so that results in your opponent getting more blocks than they should. Whereas if you bring the assist up adjacent to the guy who's going to throw the hit and you roll the push, and you push him away, now you've got a space between your assists and the guy that you just pushed away, right? I think that's like a really subtle thing. People don't think through the push. Usually that's where I start with the block, is like, what happens if I push this guy? There's a lot of times where the push is good enough, especially if you're trying to get a touchdown. Push is more than adequate enough usually to get you the space you need to score. So that's why I love Juggernaut on models that are carrying the ball, because you can just action 1 blitz, and if you roll the both down, you still get the push. And you can keep making your way down the field. So there you go.
Awesome. Yeah. That's definitely a good point to leave on, is blocks as dodges, because if you don't, is like you're just trying to move the model away from you. It's like a 3+ technically to get that.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. Right. And if you're an agility like 4 or higher character, then there's actually a board state that I've seen happen a couple of times where somebody will mark a ball carrier and they'll actually come around and mark the other side of the ball carrier. Mm-hmm. And what that ends up doing is then letting the ball carrier use a blitz as a dodge. Mm-hmm. Because if you get the 2 die into the other person and you knock them down, you can follow up into the square on the other side of them. And now you're free. And it didn't matter what your agility was. You knocked somebody out of the way. Mm-hmm. They're down on the ground. And now you can use your rest of your movement the other direction. So.
Okay. All right. We got some week 6 games. Talk about leg day.
Some of the bangers have already happened.
Yeah, we have had some bangers happen already. Out of the remaining games, which ones are you kind of looking at?
Well, that Sean and Will one certainly jumps off the list for sure.
That was my pick of the week. I think Rag and Bone, Those Who Wander, it's going to be definitely just 2 very strong staples of the community playing each other.
Yeah, and at this point, that's a battle for second place in the division, right? Neither of them have played Jurgen, right? So they're trying to position themselves as a threat to number 1 somewhere down the road, right? And yeah, I mean, this is that's a kind of a cataclysmic game for both of them, right? Mm-hmm. They could both do damage. Their team values are very similar. Their stat lines are very similar. Yeah, I mean, that's a game that could go either way, really. Kind of depends on line hits, right?
Yeah.
So,
yep. Other game we're looking at in the division this week is Taisho Charon and Loki Rat Bastards. My note is, have the Slans stated their hunger for rat flesh? Because
yeah, they certainly made an example out of the last Skaven team they played against. So
yeah, that'll be an interesting one to watch just for that. Other one, I think, will be fun to talk about in a recap is Realm Gate Marauders and Tryhards.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff that could happen in that game, for sure.
It's I think those are players that very well match each other's energies.
Yeah.
So it could lead to we could be talking about a 4 or 5 game or something like that.
I'm going to use the word stəઃkastik. So.
Okay. That's quite a word to use. Go look that one up if you don't know what it means.
Yeah.
Okay, total body division. Still some solid ones in here. My pick of the week here actually was Wolfpack and Swamp People. I think that's an interesting matchup to me.
Yeah, that's one of those games that's either 0 casualties or 10 casualties, right? Dwarves, Lizardmen. Yeah. If both players' dice are hot, and you actually crack armor, otherwise everybody just kind of sits around and looks at each other, right? Now, if you can get the dwarf linemen to the skinks, that's bad for the skinks. And we got any kind of both teams are kind of slapped around a bit, right? They're both banged up, so who knows?
Yeah. All right. Any other games standing out for you?
Let's see. Soul Peak Dooms, Rookwood Conspiracy.
That is another one I have consideration for.
Yeah, that's one of those who's got what, right?
Yeah.
Who's got the moxie to position themselves well in the league, right? That's one of those. If we were using fight terminology, this is like a mid-card fight, right? But a lot of times your headliner fights end up being kind of disappointing, right? But your mid-card fights are where some juice can happen. So yeah, I think this is that's an interesting game for sure. Jack really making a name for himself in the league so far, and Josh, he's got this human team kind of speaks to him, right? I feel like that's kind of like his calling. Mm-hmm. So this is a classic match where you kind of want to be the stick and move, tuck and roll kind of human team. You don't necessarily want to go toe-to-toe with the undead. You kind of want to use your mobility to your advantage. But that doesn't mean you can't just stand and bang. Undead are a team that absorbs a lot of punishment, but if you get the alpha strike on them, and if you get like a couple lucky removals, you can really punish an undead team if you get after those ghouls. And I think Josh's blitzers are kind of like engineered to kill ghouls, so it'll be an interesting game for sure.
Yeah, the human team is set up for that. I think one interesting side note for that game is both of these players still have their week 5 games to play. So there could be some kind of key piece missing.
Yeah, true.
For when we get to it. But as it sits, both teams look fairly full strength. And I think as both teams are full strength, that'll be a good game.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us this week. I hope that we came in at the proper time allotment for you, Chase, wherever you are listening to this.
I don't think we hit an hour and 15 minutes, but you know what? You get what you get.
Yeah, just pause it for 10 minutes somewhere in there, and rant about your game for 10 minutes, because I'm sure you would love to do that.
Yeah, well, exactly. This is the spot right now where we'll give Chase a chance to voice his thing in the car and pretend like he's on the podcast again. So,
yeah,
right now.
Okay, that's enough. I can't listen to Snotlings anymore. But yeah,
another Snotling recap.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yes. The Stunty freaks. But yeah, appreciate y'all listening. Wherever you're listening to this, make sure you give us a follow, like, subscribe, whatever sort of kudos and ratings and things you give. All those make us show up better and make us happy inside. So it gives us some sense of joy from this game of despair that we play. So appreciate y'all listening, and make sure to keep up. We got some tournaments coming down the line soon, hopefully. I've heard rumors of Wii Warriors on the horizon.
Yeah. Allegedly, it's on the way. So we don't have a date officially, but I have seen pictures of the swag. And I mean that tournament, that is a tournament for sickos, for the real sickos.
Yes. Yeah, please comment on the podcast where we're listening to bully Nathan into playing Stunties.
I have to play Stunties in that league.
Yeah.
In that tournament. So yeah, I mean, yeah. Guess what, sickos? I'll be there.
All right. Well, so all the Stunty and non-Stunty sickos out there, we'll catch you next time.
Goodbye, everybody.